Hey friends, welcome back to the Happy Homeowner Podcast, Outdoor Edition. My name is Dan Keller, and I believe that owning a home is the largest and most valuable asset we have, second to our time. As a veteran mortgage professional, investor, and Puget Sound angler, my commitment is to bring you content each week that will fill each one of these buckets in your life. Jump on board with us today, enjoy the show, and we'll see you back in the marina. This is going to be a good one today. This is new to me. This is something I know nothing about, so I'm just the color guy. I'm just going to tee up a couple of questions, these studs. But I got Connor Martinis, owner of John's Sporting Goods, good friend of mine, probably over the last 2 years, spent more time with you on the water than maybe my son. Yeah. You know, spent a lot of time on my boat together out in the Puget Sound. And then Ben Rosenbach, in my opinion, and you can fight me on this one, the best local fishing guide I know and out there. So Ben, when I first fished with Ben, it was on the river. And I think we're going to go back to that today. But the first time I ever went out with you, Hudson, God, you didn't even like Hudson because he was such a little shit.
I didn't like him.
You wanted to boot him off your boat a couple of times because he wouldn't sit still. A lot of energy. But it was on the, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was for Kings on the Sky,
yep.
Right?
Ooh, yeah. Yep, that was the first time that we actually got in the boat together.
Yeah, and that was fun. And that's, I think, when you got Hudson hooked, I got hooked on it. But today we're talking river coho. And so this is something that I think right now, they're still in the river. So why don't we start off by talking dates, and then we'll move into location and then gear.
Yeah.
You know, these fish move into the river pretty much as soon as we start getting them in the sound.
Okay.
In numbers, no, but as soon as they come into the sound, they'll start poking in and out. They'll actually wash in and out. You know, the lower end of the lower end of the rivers and estuaries and whatnot for the first couple weeks. The majority of the fish, you know, we start fishing them end of August, September out in the sound, and the majority of them sit out there and feed and gain body weight, gain body fat, and get ready for this journey. By first week of September, and it's not an exact science. It's a roughly
weather dependent.
Yeah, weather dependent, water dependent, temperature dependent. But usually by the first week of September, second week of September, we've got fishable numbers in the rivers.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So the good part is that once I was talking with another fishing guide here actually on the way here, we can fish these coho in the river for up to 4 months.
Yeah.
I mean, in January when we start steelheading, we're still catching coho.
Oh, wow.
Right. Bright fish too. I mean, one of the biggest coho I ever seen was on the North Fork of the Stillaguamish. It was the second day of February, and it was mid-20s. It was huge and just dime bright, you know. So, yeah, it's fun. Once they get in the river, you know, lighter line, lighter tactics. You're not staring at downriggers all day.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've heard a lot of guys talk about and dispel this if this is a rumor or a myth. When these coho hit the river, they don't eat, they don't process as well. Is that a myth?
They stop eating.
Yeah.
They stop eating.
They stop eating.
Okay.
Once they hit fresh water,
Okay.
most salmon stop eating.
Okay, and then as far as, so they stop eating, so out in the sound, we're trolling around, whole herring, we're trolling around squids, spoons, and mirror herring. So they're not eating in the river, so that we'll talk about gear here in a second. But how about us? Like when we catch them and eat them, are they tasting any different? Are they worse off? Are they better off? Or
I like them better out of the river, but I like any salmon better out of the river.
Okay.
In my opinion, it kind of, especially Puget Sound fish, it kind of washes that Puget Sound taste out of them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, not there's anything wrong with Puget Sound coho. They're delicious. They're fabulous. But they all kind of have, because they're feeding so much while they're out there, you know, almost a herring. Herring taste to a tinny herring taste to them. And once they get in the river, same with the Chinook, same with the steelhead, that fresh water just kind of flushes them out a little bit, you know. That's personal opinion. I'm not a big fan of real fatty fish to eat anyway. A lot of people are. That's why everybody loves those Columbia Springers so much, because they're just dripping with fat. And
Yeah.
It's just not my style.
So Connor, you talk a lot about this too, on how to prepare them. Are you preparing a fish that you caught in the river to eat any differently than how you'd prepare one that you caught on the salt?
Not so much. No. I got kind of my few favorite recipes that I like to do. I definitely like the mayonnaise on them. Lemon, dill is kind of my go-to for any kind of salmon.
Okay.
But no, I'm going to prepare them the exact same way. Cool. Absolutely.
I've not heard that before, that you actually prefer them better out of the river. That's okay. All right.
Yep.
That's
I'm
good.
kind of the opposite. I kind of like them out of the salt water, but I'm the same as Ben. I don't like that fatty, oily, you get that almost metallic taste to them, like these blackmouth that we're going to be catching in March. You get a real metallic taste to them, and that's not my favorite cup of tea. Coho in general just have more of a, they're less fishy, but in my opinion.
Real mild.
Yeah.
Well, I always lean on Connor for guidelines too, and the rules. I'll text you and be like, "Hey, is it a 1 fish or 2 fish? Or is this? Am I in the right area?" Yeah. So when we're in the rivers, maybe some rivers are different, but right now, catching these coho in the rivers, can we keep hatchery? Can we keep wild? Talk to us about how many we can keep, the rules, all of that.
If we're talking about the Skagit, we're talking about the B-run. I believe it's 2 fish.
Okay.
And I want to say it's either or.
It's either
I haven't
or.
checked in a little bit. It switches so much, but yeah. Skagit's going to be 2 fish. You keep either or.
Either or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Snohomish and the Skykomish are the same.
Same.
They weren't to start the season. We weren't actually able to fish into the Skykomish, but it opened up.
Was that November 1st?
November 1st.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's
2 fish either or.
Yep.
Okay.
Either or.
So right now we're in November.
Yep.
What options do we have river wise? What have closed? What are off limits? And where are you finding most of your fish right now?
There's really no off limits.
Okay.
Everything's pretty well open. We had such a robust run of coho. I wish they'd have realized it sooner, although all the telltale signs were there. It's pretty much statewide right now. I don't think there's any rivers that are closed, other than maybe a few coastal rivers that are closed down to coho.
Okay.
Stilly might be one that's not.
Stilly, the North Fork, but that's
the North Fork.
That's always right.
Yeah.
I mean, these are typical seasons. This Stilly shuts down when it shuts down. North Fork's never open for salmon fishing, killing.
That's
period.
open for steelhead now, I believe.
December 1st.
December 1st.
Wow.
Okay.
December 1st. The South Fork is open for fishing, but again, you can't kill any salmon up there.
Right. Your main ones are the Skagit and the Sky right now.
Okay.
Skagit,
in our neck of
Sky,
the woods.
Snohomish, Nooksack,
The
Wallace, the Green, Duwamish, Puyallup, all that stuff down there should be open still, I believe.
And the closer you're getting to the hatcheries, so like the Wallace, for instance, you're going to find more colored up fish. Not that they're not fun to catch. They're plenty fun to catch, but the table fare might be for my personal opinion, it would be out of the question.
Most of the hatchery fish in these systems are done.
So now
they're up and in the hatchery by end of October.
Okay.
So now you're kind of dealing with B-run fish. So you got an A-run, which we've already processed through the system, and now we're working on the B-run.
Okay.
Skagit has a really good B-run.
Okay. Where are you spending most of your time right now, Ben? Guiding.
Skagit. Yeah, I'm up on the Skagit.
Okay.
Been a few trips down on the Skykomish. It was good too. But the Skagit traditionally, it's just that B-run is huge.
Okay.
Big, bright fish, a lot of water to cover. That's the best part about the Skagit up there. It's just there's so much water.
Okay.
It just gives you a lot bigger opportunity, a little more river to yourself.
Well, we're going to transition to gear, but as we transition into gear, this might be a great segue for us that don't have river boats. Give us some tips on where to go if we're going to hike down to the river and cast for these guys off the shore, and then we can talk about gear after that. But I mean, let's start on the Sky, the Snohomish. Where are some good places where just the average angler, like my son, could go down and cast for these guys?
One spot I like on the Sky is Wallace Flats.
Okay.
It's easy to get to. You kind of have to hike into it a little bit, but Wallace Flats can hold a lot of fish. And the other thing at this time of year that you're kind of dealing with is chum salmon.
Okay.
Which, like Skykomish wise, you're not keeping any of the chums.
Yeah.
They're like a strictly release. They do a broodstock program with chums on the Sky right now. But That's kind of a bonus fish if you're fishing for coho. Okay. We're using a lot of the same gear, a lot of the same technique for chum as well.
Okay.
But that would be one that I would say a guy could get to fairly easily. Okay. You have a 100-yard stretch of river that you get a fish. The Wallace is dumping in at the very head of the hole. Okay. So you kind of, you're getting those fish running up to the Wallace, I would say.
Creek mouths.
Yeah.
Just about any one of the creek mouths. These coho are big creek spawners.
Okay.
I mean, you have a certain amount of fish that will spawn main stem, but the majority of them go up into the creeks and do their spawning there. This time of year, once you get past the end of October, you're 90% wild fish, which means fish are going to be all throughout the system.
Okay.
Right? Which means pretty much anywhere you go, you're going to have opportunity as long as you have the right water. You're 2 to 8 feet of water, walking speed, inside seams, boils, back eddies, frog water. They're going to be there.
Okay.
They're going to be there. And just learning, once we get into the gear thing, we'll talk about this, just how to approach them in different water conditions.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. I was just going to ask you that. What are some things that we can look for on the water that might hold fish? And you just mentioned that.
Currents.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Boils. Okay.
It's pretty much steelhead water, other than they will sit in water that's not moving. We call it frog water, slack water. They'll sit on sandy bottoms.
Okay.
They will sit suspended in a lot of the deeper waters.
Okay.
But for the most part, you want that walking speed water, so where they're not having to work real hard to keep themselves where they're at and burn a bunch of energy. Because some of these fish come into the river, they're there for months. Months. It's not like a humpy or a chum that when they come in the river, they deteriorate so fast. Coho's DNA is based to where they can spend 6, 8, 10 weeks actually in the system.
Without eating.
Without eating, without spawning.
Wow. Okay. Goes to show how much fat stores they have when we're catching them out in the Puget Sound in the salt.
That's why they're out there gorging.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, really, really pretty neat.
Okay. So gear, you got a lot of gear here. Some of this stuff looks completely foreign to me. Some of this stuff I used to have thrown when I was little with my dad. So why don't we talk some techniques and some gear?
Sure. I'm going to just point out my couple favorite things that I like to use. I really got onto these wicked lures this year. It's basically, it'd be considered a spinner, quite frankly, but they call it a hoochie spinner. But these wickets are great. We fish them 2 to 8 feet of water, that walking speed water, throw them on seams. They're great little lures. A lot of the times we're going to run like an inline sinker in front of it. There's many ways to do this. A lot of guys can run a 3-way swivel with a chunk of pencil lead on it, so you can change your weight. I generally just throw an inline sinker in front of it. Usually 3/8 does the trick. And they're wonderful to swing. I really like these.
So an inline sinker, you can come down, you can go down to John's, you can get all this gear. Ben, let's talk technique. So let's say we're fishing off the shore, okay? And we're casting out. Are we casting directly out? Are we casting up? Are we casting down?
That's going to depend on what you're throwing.
Okay.
Spinners, you basically want your gear. So it's going to depend on your water speed, your depth. So you're going to cast upriver. Whether you're fishing a soft spinner like a wicked or a blue fox that is weighted, you want that get down to the fish's strike zone, which is anywhere 6 inches to 1.5 feet off the bottom.
Okay.
When that gear's directly in front of you, so
Okay.
you're going to cast upriver and you want to let it when it gets directly in front of you. So you kind of got to time how far is it going to sink, how far is it going to go. Once it gets there, I tell my clients with spinners, you want to move them as slowly as you can and still keep it off the bottom. I tell them reel as slow as you can. You feel it ticking bottom, reel just a little bit faster. You want that down there in their face as long as you can leave it there. Because especially off the beach, because you're on the swing, right?
You're going to be swinging it.
So you want to use enough weight to get it down, but you don't want too much to where you're dragging. And you just want that thing sitting there in their face as long as you can. If you're really cranking on these spinners, you're going to pick them up out of the strike zone anyway. Putting too much pressure on them. So really learning to get a feel for where your spinner's at in the water column, and how and what it takes, the best way to keep it in that water, in that bottom 1.5 feet of the water column.
Yeah.
Right. And in the strike zone, I don't mean down below you
Yep.
or, out in the middle of the raging water. You want that in fishy water as long as you can.
So if I'm looking straight out and I'm looking at straight out is 12 o'clock, am I casting 10, 9, 10?
Left to right, you'd be casting,
Left to right,
10,
casting a 10.
o'clock,
Okay.
Yep.
So 2 clicks up, and then I'm casting, it hits the water. Am I going 1,000, 2,000? How you walk me through if I'm a client fishing with you off the shore, and then we can talk about the boat.
Just get a feel for it.
Okay.
Again, you're going to let that gear get the bottom, and you're going to start reeling. You'll feel the blade
Okay.
pick up pressure.
So you're casting
you'll
out.
feel it start
okay.
going.
There you go.
And if you keep pressure on that blade and you're not hitting bottom, don't reel.
Okay.
Just let the water. I mean, these wickeds, we fish them a lot out of the boat, and sometimes I'm literally just side drifting them.
Okay.
I tell them,
Don't even reel.
If you, don't even reel.
The blades on these,
it.
they're so light, you need just minimal retrieval rate to get
They
those
spin
things
really
flipping
easy.
over.
Wow.
Really easy.
Yeah, and you're just like Ben was saying, you're putting these in front of fish, and it's a complete aggravation bite. It has nothing to do with food. It has nothing to do with any of that. This is just in their zone. It's pissing them off. They're trying to get it out of their way.
So then let's backtrack just a tad, because I know you sell this down at the shop. If you need rod, reel, line setup, are you running braid? And run us through kind of your rod reel setup as well that you're using.
I'll go first. You can go. There's a few ways to do this, and there's going to be probably a lot of answers to this. I have a spinner dedicated rod. It's an 8'3". It's an 8 to 12 pound rod, so it has a really soft tip, but it has some backbone to it. When I fish with Ben, we run with 9.5 foot rod. I almost like that better, especially from the shore, because I'm going to be able to cast a little bit further with them.
Okay.
It's the same rod rating. It's an 8 to 12 pound rod. Reel, I liked it. Well, it doesn't matter the reel, but line-wise, I definitely like using braid. I use 30-pound braid.
Okay.
For one, you don't have stretch in it, so you're going to have a more sensitive setup, which I think is a bonus. And two, you can add a chunk of mono on the end. You can either do a top shot, or if you want to just run a short leader, you can do a swivel in front of this, and with an inline sinker, you're getting a swivel.
Okay.
And I think, for one, spinners can tangle up your line, so that'll kind of help with that regard. But that's how I like to run it. I think pretty much any style of fishing I do now is with braided line. And it's the sensitivity-wise. These have leaders with mono, so I have a little snubber involved with it, and it works really well.
Okay. Now, Ben, if you're throwing that blue fox out there, right, and you've got braid, you're going to a swivel, and then what length leader are you going with?
So I've been actually running bead chains.
Okay.
A 4-bead chain straight to my braid.
Okay.
And then you can't have the swivel too far up the line because you got to be able to cast it.
Yep.
So I've been running about 18 inches is all, 16 to 18 inches of mono with the blue foxes.
Okay.
Or, any of these spinners that we're throwing, the hoochie spinners, torpedo spinners. I build most of mine myself. Just about the nice part about that bead chain, especially if you're running it to 30-pound braid and you've got 15-pound mono, you're fishing in the river, you're going to get hung up. You're going to lose a ton of gear. Nature of the beast, right?
Yeah.
You're throwing these coho, love wood, they love rock piles.
Yep.
You're going to be throwing it into garbage, you're going to lose gear. And being able to throw that in there and break it off. I have some of these bead chains that I've been running this year have 30, 40 days on the river.
Wow.
And they're absolutely mangled. But I tied that knot 4 months ago, which is the beautiful part about braided line.
Yeah.
And it's still working. You just your mono will get shorter. Once it gets down to about 10 inches, I'll cut it off and tie a new one. It just gets shorter.
Yep.
But that bead chain, people say fishing with braided fishing line, you don't have to worry about line twists. It's not true.
No, you definitely do.
And what it leads to is wind knots.
Got it.
Nasty, dirty wind knots that you're going to make a cast. The next thing you know, you've got a bird nest. You're like, how the heck did that happen? Well, reeling slack line and line twists and braid is how that happens. So always have the swivels. Plus, for ease of changing gear out, right? Tying knots with braid when you've got more than one knot in succession, is a pain in the butt, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I turned on to I used to just run a little barrel swivel.
Okay.
But I switched to those bead chains this year, and it's a
Cool.
little more spendy, but it's really, really nice.
Love it. And then what pound mono are you using?
I'm running 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So 30 pound braid, 15 pound mono.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. What else you got down there? I'm seeing some steelhead looking things.
No, they're great.
Yeah.
These aren't necessarily, I just brought these for an example. I mean, the herringbone one's not bad, but for running
Those are both
plugs,
good plugs.
These plugs are excellent for coho. We call them, it's a Brad's Wiggler.
Okay.
It's strictly, we cast and retrieve these for coho.
Okay.
Again, this is an obnoxiously loud presentation. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been on the Skagit days where this is literally all we throw. We'll just throw these, and you're successful doing it
So
the whole
you're throwing
day.
those from the shore too, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, casting from a boat, casting from
Wow.
the shore, and crank these things in all the way to the boat, because you will have these fish hit these things
Really?
5 feet away from
Yeah.
the boat.
Okay.
Yeah. Really cool lure to fish. They're simple. I mean, it's cast and retrieve. And if you're hitting the bottom, you slow your retrieve up a little bit.
See, I don't tell my guys that.
No.
You cannot reel those things too fast, in my opinion.
Really?
Some of my plugs, like I have a couple of them this year, I actually broke the bills off of them. This is the one thing out of all this gear, you know, everything, all this other stuff, I like to fish it slowly. These plugs, in my opinion, they can't reel them too fast.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, if it's digging in you don't want it digging in the ground. That's more what I meant.
Yeah.
Right.
But as in down there banging on the rocks in the bottom, I do not mind.
Yeah.
One thing that I try to teach too is when you cast these plugs, you can throw them upstream, downstream, straight out, doesn't really matter. Very rapid retrieve, and try to get it to where you're going to make the plug make a turn. So if you throw it upriver and retrieve it back, it's going to come in a straight line. You throw it straight downriver and bring it back, it's going to come in a straight line. If you bring it across, as you start bringing it here and it gets down below you, that plug's going to make a turn to come back at you. And I cannot tell you how many times
Really?
those fish will,
Sure.
because of that little turn it makes, cause them to strike.
Absolutely. And these have 2 treble hooks on them, so we're obviously taking those off.
Yep.
You generally take the split ring and the treble hook off the tail end of this, and then the belly treble hook you take off, but you leave the split ring and you'll add one of the chain swivels.
Okay.
Usually a 4 or 6 speed chain swivel, and then to your side wash hook.
So I was going to ask you that about when I saw that. So
Yeah.
as far as regulations, I see trebles on the Blue Foxes as well.
Yeah,
No trebles?
Skagit, you can use them
You
right
can.
now.
Okay.
You can use trebles.
The
You can.
Skykomish, you can.
The Sky
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah.
Okay,
In
snow.
the first part of the year, I think
Yeah.
October 1st.
Okay.
So from September through to October 1st, it was selective gear rules up on the
Yeah.
Skagit. Then October 1st, they switched it over to where we can run the trebles and the barbs up there.
Okay. Okay. I love it. Love it. So we've got some soft beads over there.
Yeah.
I've not seen, well, I don't want to say I've not seen those before. I think we fished humpies with some of those little
Yeah, twitch and
jigs.
jig.
Yeah. So, talk us through a couple of those.
Yeah, these we fish in, like Ben was saying, frog water.
Okay.
This is going to be in slower water.
You use jerk. How you
deeper
fishing
holes.
that?
Yeah, it's basically a cast.
Okay.
You let this thing sink to the bottom, and you're twitching your rod,
Okay.
and you can reel it. Now, if there's a little current there, you can almost twitch it without even reeling your rod.
Okay.
You're trying to stay in the strike zone with these.
Okay.
But when I'm with Ben, generally we're throwing these. We're throwing these in frog water, and generally this isn't one of the first things we throw through the hole. This is probably more towards the end of. Say we've fished the hole a few times, we're not catching any fish. We'll go through there one last time and we'll throw twitch and jigs.
Okay.
But yeah, super effective, and it works really good for coho.
Got it.
For whatever reason, it seems like earlier in the season, like when these fish first get into the system, probably till about the second or third week of October, it's mainly a spitter and plug dominated fishery.
Okay.
Reason I have no clue, but at some point in the year it switches to where it will be predominantly dominated by these twitching
Really?
jigs.
Okay.
Like I'm not even throwing the plugs anymore. Tomorrow morning I'll have 3 guys throwing spinners with 2 guys behind them throwing twitching jigs. for whatever reason, it just seems to be the way it is. But like Connor says, I never run those twitchers through first. I always have the spinners come through first. If I can get them to bite the spinners, I'll leave it on the spinner bite as long as I can, because I know I can come back through. I think part of it with the twitching jigs is they're very, very invasive to them. Invasive, not evasive, to where they think that something's being attacked, whether it's them, their nest, whatever it may be. When they start to get more towards that spawn mode, they get really aggressive towards these jigs. I fish them everywhere. Like everywhere. Once if we're not getting bit on the spinners, I'll instantly switch every rod out to twitching jigs, and we will fish every inch of water from a foot deep to 30 feet deep, 20 feet deep. I like to have more of a horizontal presentation with them, so I make sure my guys are reeling. When I teach people to do it, that's kind of what I tell them. I said, this is not a vertical presentation. They call it twitching, but it's really more swimming. You're trying to swim that jig back to you. Like if it's hitting bottom every time you're doing it, you're not moving it fast enough. You still want them to chase it down and attack it. You're not fishing a bass underneath a dock where you're going to want to sit there and jiggle it in front of its face. Right? So they're a lot of fun, man. Boy, they just destroy those jigs when they get them, and it's instant combat and big hook sets and.
Yeah, and kind of dependent on the water. I mean, if I remember right, we used a lot of dark colors. We like the blacks and the purples. The blacks and cerises. Purple body, chartreuse head. Purple body, pink head.
Yeah, this guy, I don't know, you can see it. You can't, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can kind of see a little skirt under there, like a little, is that glow? Not glow, like a little UV.
Tentacles.
Wow. Huh. Okay.
But there's two different weights. There's 3/8 and ½ ounce. Again, that's going to depend on the water you're fishing.
And that's plenty weight. So you same thing, tie it onto a leader, 18-inch leader, or how are you tying those up?
I don't tie any swivels in with them. I have specific rods just for twitching, right? And I'll have about an 8-foot section of same thing, 30-pound braid to 15-pound model. I have about an 8-foot chunk of top shot that I tie these to.
Okay.
Same thing, you're going to break them off.
You get hung up, shorten it up.
A lot of the jigs,
you
right? You break it off, they get shorter. When it gets down to about a foot, I'll cut it off. And
so I just had a great idea. I'm going to send Hudson out with his buddy to a couple of these hot spots and go recover a bunch of your gear for next year when the water drops next spring, summer.
And your traditional twitching rod is generally 7.5 feet. 7 to 7.5 feet. More realistically, 7.5 feet.
Okay.
They're one piece normally. There's a company, Lamiglass makes a 2-piece twitcher, but the ones that I fish are one piece, just a more sensitive rod.
Okay, cool. Now, as far as these soft beads, are you fishing those kind of like you do just regular steelhead, or how are you fishing those any different?
Depends on if you're in the boat or on the beach.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you could fish them both ways from the beach too, but from the boat, we're usually bobber dogging them or side drifting them.
Okay.
More side drifting them than bobber dogging. From the beach and from the boat a little bit, but not as much. From the beach, we're float fishing them.
Under a float.
Under a float.
Okay. You guys, one of the great things that I love about Connor and his crew, just go into the shop and they'll even tie one of these setups up for you. If you don't know, if you're unsure, they'll sell you the gear, but then they'll help rig it for you. And then that's how I've learned. You just got to show me once or twice and I'm good. So that's what I love about you guys too. So I always ask this when you guys are in here, whether we're talking, Puget Sound fishing or whatever we're talking. Okay, Ben, you got clients going out tomorrow. What are you rigging up? And is it? And I heard you say it earlier. You'll have a kind of a split. Some guys in the front of the boat, some guys in the rear.
I have right now. There's probably 25 rods in my boat.
Okay.
And the reason being is I have either 8 or 9 twitching rods that are just twitching rods. I have 8 or 9 spinner rods that are just spinner rods, and then I have side drifting rods too in case we decide to. That's another thing we haven't talked about is bait fishing. We fish eggs.
Oh, you do?
A lot this time of year. Later in the year, it doesn't seem to work so well low in the system or earlier in the year, but later in the year like this, we'll pull the old. Egg, one of the last egg fisheries we got, really, other than a little bit of summer Chinook. and we'll side drift eggs for them. But that's kind of a last resort with me. Personally, anyway, I don't like to egg fish them unless I have to.
Yep.
There's still fall Chinook, right, in the rivers, and we're doing everything we can to protect them because that's what's hindering a lot of our river fisheries. Early steelhead, summer steelhead, chums, all that stuff. It's just all susceptible to those eggs, and a lot of the fish you catch with eggs don't make it. So, but yeah, we'll start out. I'll have 2 guys in the bow with twitch rods, with 3 of us with spinners, and the fun part about coho fishing is, we might cover 10 miles of river in a day. Just go for a big long float, pick all the pockets apart, you find a group of fish, stop and pick on them a little bit, and move on.
Yeah, that's great. Connor, what'd I miss? Miss anything?
The last thing I was going to say was egg fishery. So I think that's main. Those are going to be the whole arsenal that we take out there when we go fishing, especially this time of year. I did want to mention these hooks though that we've been using. Me and Ben were talking about these. These are the Mustad Advantage bead hooks. Okay. And I started using these. We were side drifting for coho, and it's obviously a bead hook, but they work absolutely phenomenal. They're lightweight, they're sharp, they're sticky as heck. They also make fine wire hooks for herring. I think we're going to try those for some blackmouth. Cool. But Mustad's coming out with some pretty cool stuff.
They really do have some good products.
So I just wanted to shout that out. Don't be afraid to try these hooks because they're phenomenal. And we'll try some for blackmouth running herring.
I, like Connor, started during coho season last year using them, and then I obviously drug it into my steelhead season last year, and it upped my hookup to land ratio by 30%.
Wow.
They are that grabby. And I don't know what they've done different. Hey, I'm no engineer by any means. I just catch fish for a living. They are sticky. And bead fishing, a big thing with it is losing fish.
100%.
It really is. If you have a 50% hookup to land ratio, bead fishing, you've done pretty well, and they are grabby.
Well, if the guy that does it for a living is always out there doing it, saying that he's now changing gears and trying something and using it and having success with it, we should all probably listen. And speaking of the pros, Connor, Ben, both of you guys, one of the ways you guys have put on some clinics over the summer. You guys are doing such a great job just sharing information. One of the ways you guys listening to this can thank these guys for, I know Ben's working, we're after hours, so you both have been working, all 3 of us have been working all day. But one of the ways you can thank these guys is real simple, and it doesn't cost you anything but maybe 1 or 2 minutes of your time. If you went to Google and you just got on your computer right now and you typed in Mixed Metals Outdoor, you'll see his Google Places profile come up, and you'll hit this little button that says review. Go shoot him a review and just say, hey, I gained a lot of knowledge from listening to Ben on his podcast. Same thing with Connor. Number 1, go down and see his shop on Broadway in Everett. Do the same thing. Send these guys a review. It helps raise their profile online, which helps drive more traffic to their business. And, both of you guys have been super influential in my outdoor life, and I consider you both friends, and I appreciate all the info you've given to me. And now my son, I got an up-and-comer, and I know he's hanging out with both of you guys and picking your brains probably more than I have. So I appreciate you both. One last thing as we leave, Ben, November. What do we got to look forward to December, January, Feb?
Well, I'll be coho fishing as long as he's... Last year, I think it was the second week of December before I finally hung it up. Okay. This year, we've already got the okay to fish through December on the Skagit. I really think there's going to be opportunity through the whole month. Okay. Skykomish, not so much. Some of these other southern rivers, not so much. The coastal rivers will hold out for a while too, but I know everybody's. It's steelhead season. You start seeing Christmas lights go up. It's time to start swapping gears. Okay. I'm ready. Yeah. I got to be honest. I've seen my share of coho this year. I'm still having a great time. But I think just about every fisherman in the state is excited for steelhead season this year. Cool. We've got some great returns coming. Looking at the way the salmon have come back this year, the Chinook were amazing, the coho were amazing. Look at all the chums. Good Lord. They are everywhere. Wow. 5-6 years ago, you almost couldn't find one. And now
Yeah.
You know, they're everywhere.
Yep.
So tremendous ocean conditions. I really optimistic for steelhead fishing this year, man. Local cricks, down south, over on the coast, wherever it may be. Yep. I think we're in a really good upturn.
Good.
With all our fisheries.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been great last couple of years. Well, steelhead obviously present a little bit more of a challenge than coho, but you're one of the best at doing it. So if you're interested in going out and chasing down a steelhead, hit up Ben, Mixed Metals Outdoors. And speaking of steelhead, we've already talked about you coming in, I think, next week and doing a steelhead podcast. So if you guys would like to learn about steelhead fishing and get some tips there, awesome. You're going to make a post in the John Sporting Goods group about it. So if you have any questions, you want to pick Ben and Connor's brain on that fishery, now's your time. And we'll be back next week for a winter steelhead podcast. So, hey guys, thanks a lot. This was great. Appreciate you guys listening. Like I said, go give these guys a review, and we'll see you next week for some steelhead fishing. Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.